Found a nice little bench to record on here, but it's basically like on the ground. I don't even know what to think about this. I feel like maybe it's more of like an intimate experience here with this bench, because I'm like sitting down basically on the ground talking to you. Anyways, if you're new here, subscribe, hit the like button, you know the deal. Today I'm going to talk about the problem with new self-improvement channels. So I've seen this video topic going around on the newer self-improvement channels that have stemmed from Hamza, and this is going to be an extension off the last video that I made, so go check it out if you haven't watched it already. So basically I've seen this topic pop up where people will say, like, and I'm not trying to call anybody out here, but people will bring this topic up and they'll say that the problem with these newer YouTubers who are just getting into it because of Hamza, that like nobody wants to hear about discipline, nobody wants to hear about like discipline versus motivation, nobody wants to hear about accountability, nobody wants to hear about nofap and stuff like that. So nobody wants to hear the basic principles is what I'm kind of grasping from that statement and what most people are making these videos about. And for a certain point of time, I did agree with that notion. Like when I was like listening to those videos and watching those videos, I'd kind of agree with them. I'd be like, yeah, why would I want to hear about discipline and versus motivation again and again and again? But I think we're failing to see the other side of it. So while it is true that nobody that has already been in the self-improvement game, nobody that's been watching Hamza for like months or weeks or whatever, those people don't want to hear about those like fundamental topics because they already have been in the game, right? But I think we're ignoring the fact that most people aren't part of the game. Like most people haven't been part of this game for a while, and most people live their lives without hearing these principles. So I don't think that's true that nobody wants to hear about discipline, nobody wants to hear about accountability, because there's a very large market for that, because most of the people in the world are not tapped into this like whole self-improvement space, right? So the people that don't want to hear about discipline versus motivation, that they don't want to hear about accountability, those people are the people that have already been in self-improvement. So in that sense, those people, you guys are correct. The people who have been on the game don't want to hear about the fundamentals of the game. But in that sense, I'm talking like creator to creator here. If you're talking about that, then if you subscribe to that idea, then you're limiting your own potential, right? If we go back to my philosophy of, because I personally believe that the majority of people in the world are not on self-improvement. I think that's like a top 20% of people in the world, and the 80% of the population is not a part of this like movement. And that's why you find it. So that's why you think when you're on self-improvement, you think you're like a rare breed, or you think you're like built different or something like that, because most people aren't doing it, right? So again, creator to creator here, if we're talking about that philosophy of nobody wants to hear about the fundamentals, then you're really niching down. And I know on YouTube and stuff like that, when you're selling or when you're trying to, start a business, you want to niche down. But if your niche is people who are already on self-improvement, then your max total viewership is going to be the 20% of the population. Whereas if you're open to the idea of, hey, I'll talk about the fundamentals every once in a while, because talking about those gets the like majority of the people involved as well and tries to capture their attention, the 80% of people who aren't on self-improvement. That's why I think like listening to Hamza's like business model and just picking it apart, I think he's a good creator as well. I haven't watched like any of his main channel videos like I've explained in my last video, but from his Unfiltered channel and just hearing his thought process about how he goes about treating YouTube as a business is really genius, honestly, from my perspective. And I have some sort of credibility. I mean, I go to the University of Pittsburgh and I'm like in the business school, so I'm learning stuff about business, but it's not the same stuff that you're thinking about. Like I'm not learning about entrepreneurship and stuff like that. I'm kind of doing that as my own self-study. But how he approaches YouTube as a business is really crazy. Like his goal, like he has a hook of he like baits people in by talking about like women and sex and like, you know, porn and stuff like that in the thumbnail and the title to get people to click on the video. And then throughout the video he talks more about the self-improvement, so he kind of leads them down this funnel and this path to get them to self-improvement, rather than him just, you know, trying to only just talk about self-improvement, because most people won't click on a video like that, right? People are looking for the videos of like, oh, how to attract women and stuff like that. So then they'll click on his video, and then he'll start talking about the self-improvement in order to get to like cast his net over the 80% of people who aren't in self-improvement. And then even the 20% of people that are in self-improvement, they'll click on the video anyways, because they know like Hamza, he's, you know, he produces good content anyways. So I think that's a much better strategy as a business, if we're viewing this as a business, rather than trying to exclude, be like, oh, fuck talking about discipline, stop, I don't want to talk about motivation, all this basic level stuff, when the reality is most people haven't heard the basic level stuff. So that's why we need to, at least for me personally, I'm going to be talking about basic level stuff like that every once in a while. Obviously, I'd like to think that I have some like thought-provoking content a lot of the times, and, you know, a lot of my topics aren't always, you know, surface level or basic fundamentals of self-improvement, even though I do like throw in a little bit of it here and there, because I do think personally that if I was to build this channel and just start talking about like really specific topics that are, you know, past the base level understanding of self-improvement, that wouldn't make too much sense for me. So for me personally, my idea would be to, you know, make videos about the key principles of self-improvement, just so, you know, if people are wondering where my content is coming from, I have a baseline to refer back to, in case, like, you know, maybe they're new and they're just getting into self-improvement, and then they find this random video of mine that pops off, and then they're like, oh, what does this guy stand for? Like, why is he just randomly talking about, you know, his trauma and stuff like that, instead of like talking about the fundamentals first? So I don't know if that's the right approach. For me personally, I think it's a great idea, and it's not that I'm trying to, like, you know, just steal his like flow and stuff like that, and, you know, hop on his dick and just try to do everything that he's doing. But I think it's a more strategic way of approaching trying to, like, you know, gain an audience, is to not limit it yourself by niching down too far, right? Because I personally think that the majority of people are not in tune or aware of self-improvement, and therefore I wouldn't want to limit my, you know, my potential for an audience to the people that are only aware of self-improvement and have already been exposed to it previously. Because I know there's people in my life that when I talk to them about, you know, some self-improvement concepts, and even if I tell them like about a basic kind of principle or foundation that you think if you're a part of the self-improvement space you would know, like, duh, that's a no-brainer. But when I explain this kind of thinking to someone else, like a good friend that isn't part of the space, then I, like, you know, I see something click, and I'm like, they're like more aware of it, and they're like, oh wow, this is actually a great idea. I've never really heard anybody say this kind of stuff before. So that's what I'm trying to do here, is, you know, like, tap into both sides. Obviously, I don't want to make my content, you know, too broad to where nobody's going to watch it, but I also want to make it, you know, I don't want to exclude the majority of people that aren't aware of self-improvement. So that's what I think is wrong with most of the newer YouTube channels that are, you know, kind of demonizing the fact that spreading the key principles of self-development and self-improvement is a bad thing. I don't necessarily view it as a bad thing. Let me know what you think. Thanks for watching. I'll see you next time.